Let's just get right into it. Assassin's Creed Valhalla is like a game gilded in gold. It looks so beautiful from the outside. The story seems fascinating, with so much being set up just in the first 5 hours. I couldn't wait to see the adventure Ivor and Sigurd would embark on, the unraveling of the mystery surrounding the pair of assassins they've joined up with, and learning more about the Brotherhood at this point in time and their conflict with the Order of Ancients. The gameplay seemed to make some unique strides too. You get to play as a damn Viking warrior raiding monasteries in a longship. That's so awesome. Well, after beating the game, I now feel so dumb. I hadn't seen the stretched out and hollow mess that I'd been forewarned about by my predecessors. The story is by far the worst atrocity that this game commits. In this video, I'm mostly going to be focusing on how the story managed to take a tragic nosedive after 5 hours, like a fat dead duck falling out of orbit as if struck down by God himself. I'm also going to be focusing in on the ending and what it says about the way these games are written, as well as focusing in on the franchise as a whole and whether or not there is a future I'm interested in. I have a lot of thoughts on this game, so please bear with me because it is going to get very rambly, but I promise I'm going somewhere with all of this. Before I get into the story section, I'm going to briefly touch on the gameplay because I do have some grievances to get out there. Then we'll move into the meaty juicy section where I pretty much rip into this game like an unchained maniac. However, if you do enjoy the story to this game, that's all good. I'm glad you're happy with the game. I'm not trying to tell anyone they can't enjoy it because who the fuck am I to tell you that? More power to you if you do. But be warned, you may hear my opinion and become very upset and want to beat my whittle ass like a bongo, and it's already so sensitive. So please, just be warned for my tight tush's sake, okay? Alright, hopefully I rooted out nearly every potential viewer with that butt stuff, so now, let's begin. For real, I'm not going too deep into the gameplay. I discussed a lot of the new features in my previous video, so you can check that stuff out there if you're so inclined. But don't you dare leave yet. You stuck around after the butt talk. You're here to stay, pal. So when I heard this game was repetitive, I feared they were talking about the gameplay. Because most Assassin's Creed games have extremely repetitive gameplay, and in this game, you really start to feel it relatively early on in relation to the game length. For me, it began to set in around 15 hours in, which is a good run, but again, this is like an 80-hour game, so that doesn't really bode well. The combat is just the same thing every time you get into a fight, and when you get into a fight, usually you end up fighting at least 3 people, so that accelerates the combat fatigue a bit. But what really pushes that acceleration into overdrive is the raids. I thought the raids were a great new feature that the game introduced, and I stand by that. But at the same time, the raids all blend together after a while since none of the locations in this game really stand out. It's always either some mossy stone monastery, a small rundown fishing village, or a random camp. During these raids, you're killing upwards of 20 to 30 guys at a time, and the game encourages you to do these often in order to level up your settlement. The combat in this Assassin's Creed game is about 85% fighting and 15% stealth, so swinging that axe and cutting a dude's head off begins dope, but after seeing it non-stop across 60 hours, it quickly loses its barbaric charm. The way Odyssey broke up the combat was by having fun, unlockable abilities to use. This game has abilities too, but they all pretty much suck. I've been using the abilities I found pretty early on because nothing else is really even worth swapping in. I use the tackle punch thing because sometimes I want to bash a dude's head in, but most often I use the leaping axe attack because it's good against shields. I spent a good deal of time early on searching for more books of knowledge which you need to unlock those abilities, but after the first few, I gave up. Nothing seemed worth it. I'm sure people have their favorites, but I definitely haven't found anything better than what I started with. The stealth aspect of the combat isn't even worth talking about because I doubt the developers spent much time discussing it themselves. It's the same old shit, and yet, the parkour somehow feels worse than ever. It's cool you can time assassinations to kill tougher guys. That's it. Next. Finally, in regards to the traversal, I really like the longship. Though, I wish there were some actual naval combat in some way. Not really sure how that would work, maybe that's just a pipe dream of mine. And the fucking horse, dude. This thing drives me goddamn nuts. I can barely move up the slightest incline, and it does that thing where if you call it while moving, whenever you try to get on it, it just keeps moving away. Or even if you're standing completely still and it stops waiting for you to get on, it starts moving again when you get closer. You know how many times I placed a dumbass NPC on the floor because my fucking horse kept moving an inch away from me? I swear to God, I hate this fucking cunt. As made clear earlier in this video, I was really let down by the story for Valhalla, but that didn't happen right away. I pretty much went into this game with zero expectations. The last two Assassin's Creed games pretty much cancelled each other out for me. I really didn't like Origins, but I thought Odyssey was a good step forward, so I was cautiously optimistic for Valhalla when I first booted it up. And within the first hour or so, I was super into the story. There was some good setup with Eivor's past and how it drove her motivations in the present day. We begin with Eivor's parents being killed in a raid. Her father gave himself up to try and save everyone else, but instead he was killed along with some others. Eivor felt this death was dishonorable and cowardly, and she is clearly overcompensating for it in her adulthood. It also felt like there was a more mystical and symbolic element going on with how Eivor was scarred by a wolf as a child, Eivor's sudden visions of Odin appearing and talking with her, and the continued mention of how Odin will be killed by a wolf in Ragnarok. The setting it set up was unique for this story. Eivor was a rebellious but skilled warrior serving under a jarl who was her adopted father. Not only that, but her stepbrother Sigurd was the young man who saved her from the wolf as a child and was set to return from a 2-year journey soon. But right before he arrives, Eivor is told by a seer that she would betray him in the future. Then when Sigurd does return, he shows up with 2 hidden ones, aka assassins. This is all some tasty setup that had me genuinely excited to see how all these plot threads would weave together. The plump old cherry on top was that after Eivor got her revenge on the man who killed her parents, she, Sigurd, the Hidden Ones, and half of the Raven clan decided to set out to England to start their own jarldom. Then, we flash out of the Animus and join Layla Hassan, who has teamed up with Desmond's old assassin's crew of Sean and Rebecca. They are at Eivor's remains in North America with the staff from the end of Odyssey. The world seems to be on the brink of destruction following Desmond's sacrifice, which seems to have only delayed the inevitable. So Layla and the team have to figure out how to stop this slow destruction for good. That's all within the first 5 hours. You can't tell me that all that setup doesn't sound promising. If that seems like it moved at too well of a pace for you, don't worry. The second the clan touches down on English soil, the game comes to a screeching standstill. The main plot involving Eivor, Sigurd, and the Hidden One's relationship entirely vanishes without a trace, seemingly for no reason other than the writers felt they had given it their all in the setup, so they earned a good old break. The game turns into a repetitive filler mission extravaganza with mini arcs based around neighboring civilizations that take a good 3 to 5 hours to complete due to convoluted plots and 2D characters I could not bring myself to care much about, since none of the story within these arcs actually impacts much of anything at all. I feel like some people will defend these sections, claiming they flesh out the world. And that is true. The first 1 or 2 flesh things out and give us a fresh idea of the politics of the land and the relationships between all the factions of people. But don't you think that could have been done in a more cohesive plot involving all of the main characters? The game becomes Eivor's next adventure to Piss-Ass-Shire, then she returns home and goes to Shit-X next. It gets so tedious, boring, repetitive, and overwhelming that it genuinely feels like the game is deliberately stalling you from advancing in the plot that was set out from the beginning because it really doesn't have much else to say. It set up a good story, but when it came time to deliver, it immediately ran out of ideas. Let me ask you, if a game is set up for 5 hours, with a handful of characters going on an adventure together, would you expect the rest of the story to largely feature those characters? Or would you expect the story to immediately cut out all those core characters except the primary one, and continuously introduce new sets of characters every 5 hours who are then abandoned for another new set of characters continuously? There aren't even really characters to check in with at your settlement, except for one person who just gives you the next arc to start. This game sold me on being about building a community and using that community to influence surrounding civilizations to assert power. But instead, it's about Eivor meeting wacky Vikings and goofy Saxons in order to make pals. Pals for what? I don't know. This was Sigurd's idea that also everyone in the clan seemingly begins to hate Eivor for. It all feels so sloppy. To show you what I mean, I'm going to continue describing some of the specifics of the story. So once you land in England, luckily, you stumble upon an abandoned settlement with some bandits held up there. You kill them all and pow! You've already got yourself the skeleton of a settlement. Upon establishing this settlement, Sigurd immediately takes off with Bassam, the head assassin, to visit another settlement of Vikings he knows about. Eivor is assigned her first quest to build an alliance with Grandbridgeshire. The Jarl Soma has been driven out of her settlement, and her advisors and army are scattered. So Eivor has to round them all up and prepare for an assault to take back Grandbridgeshire. However, Soma also confides in Eivor that she believes one of her advisors betrayed her, and asks if Eivor can figure out who it is. I just haphazardly chose one of them because I had no idea which one was the traitor, and knew there wouldn't be any repercussions if I chose wrong. I still don't know if I was right or not, but I guess it doesn't really matter. Then you assault Grandbridgeshire, take it back for Soma, and now Eivor and Soma are best friends forever. Now picture a variety of those missions all wrapped up in one singular arc. A mission tracking someone down, a mission rescuing someone, an assault mission, a siege mission, sometimes with a loose RPG decision thread hanging over them. Put all that in a blender, mix it up, and pour yourself 16 cups. There you'll have the vast majority of the game. To put into context how many missions are dedicated to these Alliance mini-arcs, there are 102 missions out of 156 total missions, and that's being generous. I'm just using IGN's official main story walkthrough list, which includes like collecting the codex pages and assassinating all the targets. These Alliance mini-arc quests account for 65% of the entire playthrough. To put this in the context of the game's story though, by my account it takes 126 missions to complete the main campaign, which means the Alliance arc missions take up 81% of the total story. These mini-arcs are the vast majority of the story, and they have nothing to do with any of the main characters. Do you want to see how much of the Wikipedia plot summary these quests account for? Not even a full paragraph. 65% of the total missions and 81% of the plot doesn't even take up half of the plot summary. You know why? Because these arcs are absolute, dragged out, time-wasting filler to pad out a plot that would otherwise be, at the very most, 1/3 of this game's length. So, after the Grandbridgeshire arc, Eivor sees Sigurd again, who only helps to initiate the story for the next mini-arc and sits out of all the action and plot development anyway. He may as well have not been there at all. The next time the plot with Sigurd progresses is about 25 hours in, the second time we see Sigurd since settling here. And oh joy, he and Basim are both giving Eivor a hard time for literally no reason. Sigurd seems much more easily agitated, and they're both going on about some stone that they want because Sigurd is having visions, or at least he thinks he is, and the stone will somehow help. Also, I guess at this point he decided he wants to be King of England too. It's all very unclear what's happening because both Sigurd and Basim refuse to tell Eivor for no reason, despite how much time there is for either of them to tell her. So they're both acting dicky, and of course this is all wrapped up somehow in making an alliance. Doesn't really matter, but just letting you know the depths of my misery. They then find this woman Folke, who is supposed to be like a local mystic or something. I don't know, but she's the game's resident expert on the Isu. And essentially after some missions and nonsense, Folke also turns out to be part of the Order of Ancients, and kidnaps Sigurd, who she wants to reveal some inner truths to. Eivor returns back to the settlement to try and figure out a way to save Sigurd. Then this drop-dead dumb motherfucker named Dag challenges Eivor to a duel to the death because he claims she's trying to usurp Sigurd. And this all makes absolutely zero sense, because first of all, Dag is part of Eivor's crew. You can see him on the longship, so he knows exactly what she's doing, and she's literally the only one who's trying to do anything to save Sigurd. But she's forced to kill that punk after giving him like 100 chances to back down, and then the entire settlement all looks pissed at her. Like, fuck all of you. She doesn't have to prove a thing to you. What is the point of this story? Blah blah blah. After more alliance missions, Eivor calls on some of the people she's made alliances with in the past to come together to save Sigurd. If you think it's going to be a cool moment of worlds colliding, you're wrong. It goes the same as any assault mission. You siege the castle, save Sigurd who has had his arm severed, and flee back to your settlement. Apparently, Folke revealed some truth to Sigurd, and now he believes that he is a god reincarnated. Eivor is pretty much like, yeah, okay bud, whatever, I love you, I hope you're okay. And for the rest of the game until the last missions, Sigurd just mopes around the settlement acting like an asshole. Occasionally, Sigurd actually interacts, but it's only to act paranoid as fuck. Like when Eivor is ruling on a matter, and Sigurd comes out and pretty much accuses her of treason, but Eivor only did that because Sigurd's wife told Eivor that Sigurd wouldn't come out of his room to handle the situation in the first place. So I can see how this may all be confusing by now. It may seem to you that a lot is happening and that it's difficult to keep up with this story. The truth is, I'm doing an absolutely terrible job streamlining it all together into a concise story arc because the game doesn't have a concise story arc. It's hard to even say it has a main storyline since the only through line is that you are Eivor and you love alliances. But let me assure you, despite my ineptitude, this story is far from complex. Focusing in just on Sigurd and Eivor, this may be one of the most undercooked stories in a video game that I have ever seen. Boiled down, over the course of nearly 55 hours until the final set of missions begins, Eivor and Sigurd showed up in England. Then Eivor went off around the country, and Sigurd started going a little wacky. Sigurd was kidnapped and tortured, then saved by Eivor. Back at the settlement, Sigurd isolates himself in agitation while focusing on his visions, implying himself to be a god. Does that make sense? It's such a small sliver of the story, yet it's the most important thing to keep in mind. So let's begin wrapping up because this is exhausting. On to the game's ending. So at about the 60-hour mark, I finally beat the main game. I conquered all of the map that I needed to, along with all the good little boys and girls on the continent that I had to. I still have to conquer Hamburger Town, but the main plot as well as the present-day story plot are both done. These motherfuckers, dude. These absolute backstabbing pieces of shit. I can't believe what they did to me. After everything they put me through, the ending was actually good. That's the biggest slap in the face of all. How dare they? I'm legitimately pissed off, and I'm not pissed because, oh wow, the ending proved me wrong, I'm just a hater who could suck a big one. No. This is like evil genius level shit. This is like abusive relationship stuff. The last 2 hours of this game just proves that buried somewhere beyond this steaming crap avalanche, there are people with some storytelling ability. The Assassin's Creed team must have concocted some type of formula that is forced into every game. I don't know if it's the writer's fault or if it's Ubisoft pointing a gun to their heads, but there is a pattern of abuse here. The writers managed to keep the game interesting for the first few hours in order to hook people, but then they fuck off for the other 95% of the game. They just vanish. Are they okay? Are they not allowed to write? I don't know. But at the end, they must be released back out of their cages. Since this franchise will never die, the ending needs to be written strategically. There always needs to be some hook to get the fans talking on Reddit and analyzing trailers and citing lore and blah blah bullshit. There's always some major twist at the end of every game that seems like it's about to change everything to prod fans into thinking that now something major is definitely going to happen in the next game, and then the series will really be back on track. This formula has never been more apparent to me than in this game. The real reason I'm pissed is because I've fallen for this so many goddamn times, and I'm teetering on the edge of falling for it again. They are so good at making it seem like the status quo is about to forever change at the end of each game, but then, without fail, it just goes back to business as usual. Fuck them. It was a cool ending, but I'm not falling for it this time. I'm gonna spoil it here because they don't deserve your money. They treat you like crap, then they give you a little smooch and whisper sweet nothings into your ear right before they leave, because they know you're going to be waiting for them when they get back with expectations of something better to come. Perhaps when Assassin's Creed comes back you'll get more than a smooch this time. Maybe it'll be that supreme suck job you've always dreamed of. Well, that suck job is never coming, and neither are you. So spoilers ahead. I'm getting into the specifics to show you exactly what I mean with this nefarious formula. Once you finish prancing across England and making all your alliances, you get a mission to speak with Sigurd. He says that it's time for him to go back to Norway before he leaves this world for Valhalla. Eivor is like, okay sure, I love you so much no matter how much of a shithead you've been, let's go. So they sail back off to where the game began. According to lines of dialogue in this mission arc, I guess it's been a couple years since Eivor and Sigurd officially left for England. But now that they're back, the one thing Sigurd wants to do is go taunt his dad. Totally a fucked up thing to do, but hey, Sigurd is still fucking nuts, so let's go. They find the old Jarl drunk in a pub, and this old man is so happy to see his two kids, and immediately Sigurd starts ripping into him and even choking him at one point. Meanwhile, his dad is making some really excellent points as to why he acted the way he did, but Sigurd and Eivor are both like, nah, you're a pussy. This scene also serves to remind Eivor that her birth father put down his axe not because he was a coward, but in order to try and save his family, and that he died a hero. So of course Eivor is like, nah, he pussy too. Then they leave. Right before they get back on the longship, Sigurd and Eivor talk about Sigurd's visions for the first time ever in the whole game. Then Eivor tells Sigurd that she sees visions of Odin creeping around too, and tells him about the original betrayal vision she had at the start. Then Sigurd says that he knows Eivor would never betray her. What the fuck are you saying? You just spent 30 hours being an absolute ass to Eivor because you believed the very thing you are now claiming you'd never believe. Fuck this. Just as quickly as Sigurd began treating Eivor like crap, now we are back to them being friendly again. Why? Because all that middle stuff was just filler and didn't really count. This is the real story now, can't you tell? It's because things are finally happening again. So Sigurd has the crew sail over to this random spot in Norway, then leads Eivor up this snowy pass. They come across an Isu doorway and enter into an Isu facility with what Sigurd refers to as the world tree within. The whole time, Sigurd is like, yep, this is just like my visions, and Eivor's like, oh fuck, this is sick. Nice visions, bro. Through this tree, Sigurd says they can enter Valhalla, and one of the branches comes down and connects to their backs, very much like an animus. Eivor awakens at a giant feast with hundreds of warriors, and Sigurd is there with his arm grown back. Sigurd tells Eivor that they've made it, that they can now spend eternity in Valhalla. So every day they go out and charge into the Golden Fields and engage in combat, where Eivor shreds dudes up. Look at this. This is awesome. Bye, bitch! But at the end of every fight, Sigurd once again loses his arm. Then the day goes to white, and Eivor wakes up in bed only to do the same thing over again. Each time, though, something seems more off. She thinks she sees her birth father on the fields. Then one day, she awakes and Sigurd has brought her birth father to see her. She gets enraged, thinking that her father died a coward and wouldn't be in Valhalla. Sigurd claims he's the one who brought him here because he has power in this place, but Eivor suspects something is wrong. She feels that this isn't the real Valhalla, that they are merely in a simulation. She tries to convince Sigurd to leave with her, stating that hollow victories every day and a false life are not what she wants, despite it seeming like Valhalla. Sigurd reluctantly agrees, but then Odin grabs them both and tries to force them to stay. Eivor tries to hold Odin off while Sigurd escapes, but when Sigurd reaches the stairs, Eivor cannot follow. Odin pulls her back by her axe no matter what. More of Eivor's friends arrive on the stairs to help, but it is only by unequipping your axe and not fighting Odin at all that he no longer has any power over Eivor and she can escape with the help of her friends and family. Odin grabs onto her one last time, asking what more she could want than battle, honor, and glory. Leaning back on her parents, finally accepting that they didn't die cowards, she says, everything else. And Odin is sucked back into the simulation and Eivor and Sigurd escape. Let me stop right there. The initial setup for Eivor's character back at the beginning of the game pretty much had absolutely zero development from then until now. She became a static character, serving as a life lesson machine for the mini-arc characters. Yet, this singular mission managed to thematically tie everything together for her and complete her character arc in this outrageous setting, and I thought it was extremely well done. However, this specific example proves to me how much this game was unnecessarily stretched out, because the central development for the main character is set up in 5 hours, then wrapped up in an hour and a half. There was absolutely no need for this game to have 50 hours in between. Keep that in mind as we go forward. So Sigurd and Eivor escape the World Tree, but Bassam is waiting for them when they get out. I guess somehow this creepy fucking guy followed them all the way from England without being seen for weeks, and then stalked them into the Isu facility. He begins ranting and raving about his vengeance, which no one knows what he's talking about. Then he tries to kill Sigurd and Eivor. He mentions something about Eivor having killed his son long ago, and while it doesn't make any sense to Eivor or Sigurd, the implication at this point is that Bassam is the reincarnation of Loki, Eivor is the reincarnation of Odin, and Sigurd is the reincarnation of Tyr. Bassam is the only one who seems to fully know this, and while it isn't outright said, it's heavily implied during Eivor's vision missions into Asgard, as well as from lines of dialogue the simulation characters use to refer to Eivor and Sigurd. Odin would have killed Loki's son, the Great Wolf, millennia ago, so blah blah, Eivor beats this dude and Sigurd sticks him in the World Tree. With the fight being over, Sigurd and Eivor have a moment to talk. Sigurd says, yeah, sorry I've been the biggest piece of shit in the world the last couple years. These visions in my head got me spinning, fam. Also, you're the new Jarl because I pretty much never did that job anyway. Eivor freeze frame jumps and we cut to the present day. So it only took 50 hours for the present day story to become relevant again. I said in my initial review that it seemed like the present day was actually going to be a bigger factor in this game because of the implications of what was going on at the time. I couldn't have been more wrong. This game, more than any other, ignores the present day to the point where it only bookends the full narrative. Pretty sure that has never been done before. Anyway, for some reason this trio of buffoons thinks that the World Tree is what they need to find in order to slow down the magnetic field around Earth, which Desmond activated in his death because it is causing things to go wacky, but not to stop it entirely because it is still protecting the Earth. How do they come to this conclusion? Why would the World Tree have anything to do with Desmond since he died somewhere else entirely? They don't know, and they don't care. Layla has just gotta get to that tree. Layla also claims that this is exactly what everything has been building up to, and she needs to bring the staff from Odyssey to protect herself from the radiation in that place. So naturally, she immediately drops the staff when connecting to the World Tree. Inside the World Tree, she meets Bassam, who has been there for over 1,000 years, and has somehow taken over the simulation. Layla does what she needs to do, I guess, then the shiny glow boy and his tree of infinite possibilities shows up. Not very hard to figure out that this is Desmond. He is trying to find a future where humanity survives in his tree of simulations. So Layla is like, hey, why don't I help you with the dumbest idea ever? We should look at things that could have happened if you hadn't saved the world to try and save the world in the future. You know, we should look at timelines that could never happen now. And Desmond's like, haha, sick! Also, you're gonna be dead in 30 seconds since your dumbass dropped that staff. And Layla's like, LOL, I guess I'll stay here forever with you. And so she does. But Bassam gets out of the World Tree, picks up the staff, and becomes young again. He begins talking to an Isu goddess about reuniting his family and how the world is his for the taking, blah blah blah. Massive setup for the next game since we now have a hidden one in the present day who is also a reincarnated god in partnership with the surviving Isu holding onto a piece of Eden. Sounds totally insane, right? Well, the real kicker is Sean and Rebecca just take him in as part of their squad. The fuck? You saw him betray Eivor in the Animus. Layla went into that facility and only Bassam came out. Why do you even trust this guy? Then, to take it to the next level of dumb, Bassam's like, I want to speak to the leader of the assassins face to face, over the phone won't do, and Sean and Rebecca just drive out to go get William Miles and leave Bassam to just fuck around in the Animus while they're gone. Dudes, you're supposed to be the smart ones. This is so stupid. Let me remind you, all of this happens in less than 2 hours. This is the final step in the formula. This is the kind of holy shit moment the game uses to trick you into thinking that the next game is gonna be nuts. It's this kind of stunt that Assassin's Creed keeps pulling to set off a spark in your mind to fool you into thinking something major is gonna happen next. Think back just to the previous game. In Odyssey, Alexios or Cassandra shows up at the very end, ancient beings surviving thousands of years just to hand off this magical staff to Layla. It was a silly moment, but it was still a holy shit moment. What does this mean for the fight against the Templars? Can this be used to save the world somehow? And look what happened. Layla did literally nothing with it and just passed it off like a baton to set up the next big holy shit moment. Honestly, while part of my brain is dying to know what happens next in the story, now more than ever, I know that nothing will. There is no longer a story for Assassin's Creed. Bassam being in the present day, even if he is the main present day player character, is not going to change anything. Sure, maybe he'll have some more quippy lines and some more villainous undertones in the 20 minutes of screen time he gets in the next game. But you have to face the facts. Bassam is likely to be totally sidelined for the number of games he's in until the final 2 hours of the last game he's featured in. He may have something exciting coming up, but that's probably 300 hours of gameplay away. And at this point, I'd rather save my time and maybe check in on the story by watching cutscenes online for the next couple of games until this franchise finally dies. While this story had a great beginning and a great end, they clearly, deliberately ensured that there was enough padding so they could maximize the player's exposure to the items being sold on the main menu. If you think their script writing formula doesn't somehow interlock with their monetization strategy, you're fooling yourself at this point. Why did this game have to be 60 hours? It didn't. These games are now actively being written worse purposely to the company's benefit and to the player's detriment. The heart is long gone. This is solely a product. If they had any interest in telling you a new story, it wouldn't be taking them 7 games to continuously be on the brink of doing so. In relation to the franchise as a whole, Valhalla is not the best, but it's also not the worst. Honestly, I don't know. Maybe one day I'll do a ranking video of the entire series to see how many people I can upset, but as of today, I have no clue where it stands in comparison to all 200 games. I just know that I started off having fun with it, and then it really drove its own enjoyable aspects into the ground by forced repetition, plus over a decade of baggage with its overused system. The story was the real letdown. I have to tell you that some days I had to force myself to play this game, and other days I was playing happily for a couple of hours. But if you're looking for a good story, this isn't the game for you. Overall, I'd give it a 5 out of 10. What advancements it did make were hindered by its significant flaws. I did want to compare Valhalla to Origins and Odyssey though, since all three games make up what we can now call the Layla Hassan trilogy. I don't think a single one of these games matches up to any before Black Flag. I know Assassin's Creed, the original, is an aged game, but I also know for a fact I'd get more enjoyment out of that concise game than out of any of these three overbloated entries. But in regards to this trilogy, I still think Odyssey was the best overall game. While there are things I absolutely hate about all three of these games, Odyssey had the least to hate. Then I think Valhalla comes in second place. Despite the story being non-existent, the setting, the raids, and the longship were nice additions. And I still think Origins is a fat shit pile. So that's my ranking for these three, although none of them are really anything to write home about. I was expecting to have more to say about Valhalla, but I don't think the minute differences between these three games is worth getting into in this video. Since Assassin's Creed rebooted with Origins, I've been waiting to see a game that justifies that reboot, but I truly have not seen the potential of a proclaimed massive overhaul lived up to in the slightest. These games just gave us bigger maps. The real massive overhaul of Origins was to make the map too big to be enjoyable, and each game has followed in its footsteps. Yes, they also redesigned the combat system, and now you have dialogue choices that they pretend matter, but everything else remains unchanged. Instead of being in a specific large city, now you get to roam around all of ancient Egypt, Greece, or England, and be as miserable and bored as you were in Paris and London. Awesome! The problem with these three games is that they're playing at being RPGs, but they never reward you like real RPGs do. RPGs give you a lot of dialogue options because every now and then something you discuss with someone will become relevant in a small or large way. Maybe you change the character's personality or mission outcome with something you said, or maybe by continuing to ask prodding questions, you learn something that helps in a future mission. RPGs give you big worlds to explore because there's an entire underground of mysteries which add to the lore, bring up questions, or reward you with hidden side quests. I know there's some hidden stuff in the Assassin's Creed maps, but let's not pretend it's anywhere near Skyrim or The Witcher, which you know this game is kind of marketing towards, especially Valhalla. Doing all that extra work isn't always fun or easy, but we do it because we know we are earning something in the long run. So when games pop up pretending to be full-blown RPGs, they think they just need lots of character dialogue and a big world, because what's the difference? They're not rewarding players for putting in the extra work, they're just putting in extra work. You know why? Because people keep buying these games. The original games were far from perfect. They suffered from a lot of issues which the franchise has continued to suffer from, but it was all at least fresh and innovative then. The series was unique and felt impressive and expansive, with the story stretching through the centuries. In each game, things always felt like the world was closing in on the brink of disaster, and there was a mystery to unravel in order to save it. That stopped after Assassin's Creed 3. Was it the best game? I don't think so. But it should have ended there. Now, the series feels like it's grasping at straws to stay relevant. It's begun copying game series that Assassin's Creed itself helped inspire. I remember Shadow of Mordor being marketed as Assassin's Creed, but in Middle-earth, with some more advanced features like the Nemesis system. That game was a hit, so you know what Assassin's Creed did? They made a lesser, knockoff version of the Nemesis system and crammed it into Odyssey, seemingly only to pad out the gameplay time to complete the story because, again, the more you play, the less often you come across new weapons and armor, and those ads on the home screen get a lot more time before your eyes. So those are my thoughts on the current state of the franchise. It is a living thing, ever evolving and trying to survive by any means necessary, but it lost its soul a long time ago. I don't think my feelings have been well masked in this video. Particularly my conclusion in the story section may have given my feelings away, but I think Assassin's Creed Valhalla has once again pushed me away from the franchise. I first fell off after Assassin's Creed Unity. I largely ignored the franchise for years and only played the newer games when I saw them free with gold on Xbox Live. This pandemic gave me more free time than I ever wanted, so when I saw Origins and Odyssey on sale in a bundle, I went for it. I don't regret playing any of the games in this franchise. They all have their moments, and honestly, parkouring up buildings and doing air assassinations on goons brings me a wave of nostalgia. I don't think Valhalla is a bad game. I don't even think it's the worst game in the franchise. But after playing this one, I feel like I'm finally ready to say goodbye to Assassin's Creed for good. It had a great initial run, and it even received critical acclaim on the game following what should have been the franchise's endpoint. Maybe Black Flag's success is the reason that Assassin's Creed has limped on in the following years. I'm not exactly sure what went wrong, but I don't feel like there is any heart in this series anymore, and the more games they shoot out, the more they feel like corporate products designed to hit certain demographics and meet a quota of sales and in-game purchases. Honestly, writing this right now, I kind of feel empty. Once I got through the story section, something clicked for me, and it's not a feeling I'm particularly enjoying. I suddenly feel completely indifferent to the idea of Assassin's Creed. And I really hate that. I loved these damn games. I was obsessed with them when I was younger. It was by far my favorite series and nothing was even close. I played through Assassin's Creed Brotherhood more times than I can count, and I'm sure if I went back and played it today, it wouldn't hold up at all. But who fucking cares? Enjoying a video game isn't about how it's going to hold up in 10 years, it's about the feeling you get while playing, how sweaty your palms get in a tough situation, the new surprises you encounter, and bosses you can't figure out how to beat until they've killed you 15 times and you're mad as hell. And it's about the smile on your face that you didn't even know you had until you see yourself reflected off the TV screen. That's what Assassin's Creed used to be to me. It wasn't a chore to complete, and it wasn't a game that needed justifying to enjoy. It used to be just good, and now, for me at least, it isn't. And that feeling fucking sucks. I don't want to end on a total downer, and for real, if you made it this far and you legitimately still enjoy Assassin's Creed as a franchise and you have no idea what my problem is, I'm totally happy for you. I'm not trying to ruin anyone's enjoyment of anything, plus, who the hell am I to tell you what's good and what's bad? This review for Valhalla took a turn at some point into an existential crisis of a longtime fanboy, but I hope people at least had fun? Did anyone have fun? At least in the beginning? Remember the butt stuff we talked about? Oh my god. Oh, we were so young then. Thank you so much for watching all of this. If you've made it this far, you are now officially my best friend. Apologies to Derek, and you will be receiving your half of the necklace in the mail shortly. If you have any thoughts on Assassin's Creed, please drop them in the comments. What's your favorite moment? Who is your favorite assassin? And if you liked Valhalla, please feel free to tear me apart in the comments and even bring my mother into it. If you liked this video, you may like these other videos on the screen or others on my channel.